shrinks are going to get mad at us.
Shh, don't say that so loud.
It's on recordings. Okay, guys, I'm ready.
Okay.
Wait.
From the beginning or from what are we doing today?
I'll start it all over.
Yeah. Oh, you have another quote, though?
I'll come up with something. I'll probably just go, hey.
No. You got to have something that's going to make me smile. Oh, my gosh.
Nope, I got nothing. Let's go.
Got nothing? Okay.
Oh, what is this?
No, you can't ruin it by telling me.
What was that from?
That's also Borat. It's
Could
just
you try and see if you can do one that I recognize?
Yeah.
something about space or fantasy, like Star Wars or The Hobbit.
Or Top Gun.
Princess Bride. Princess Bride would work.
Let's go with Top Gun.
Top Gun. Hold on to your butts.
No, that's not Top Gun.
Yes, it is.
Is it Top
Because you're
Gun?
dangerous. It hurt my teeth, guys. Now my eyes hurt and my teeth.
Careful you don't get your tongue caught in there. Yeah, hold on to your butts. That's totally Top Gun, man. Wow. It's awesome.
Danger zone.
In my head, it goes straight to Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park? What does?
Hey, guys, come on, let's go.
Hold on to your butts.
Oh.
It's also Jurassic Park. Really? Yeah.
Where?
They're probably quoting Top Gun.
I know, but he was hacking while he was doing it. He was doing the computers. Hold on to your butts.
And now we're back to Scott. All roads lead back to Scott.
Oh my gosh. You just asked the question, I answered it.
I don't have a movie quote. Let's go.
Let's go.
All right. Welcome to the Pillar Podcast. I'm Eric Smith, the founder and president of the Pillar Seminary. Today, I'm joined by Dan Lowry.
Hey-o! I was going to hey-o and interrupt him anyway, so you threw me off.
No, but Dan Lowry's actually here, though, so that's good.
Yep.
Which means we can record a podcast, and I don't have to complain about the sound quality probably.
You'll probably still find a way.
Yeah,
to
there will be
complain.
complaints.
Yeah. And Scott Booth.
Yo.
Hey-o!
Stop.
So, Scott, what are we doing today?
So we're going to answer an email that we've never, ever addressed before in a previous podcast that I refused to release because the sound quality was terrible. Okay. So Brandon sent us an email and asked the following. So here we go. He said, hey, guys, I've been trying to think through the following question. In what way did Jesus' death qualify to be viewed as a Jewish sacrifice versus a normal Roman execution? It's clear that the New Testament writers understood, perhaps eventually, that his death was a sacrifice, but what is not clear to me is how they arrived at that conclusion. It seems improbable that at the cross anyone was looking at this Jewish rabbi being executed next to these other criminals, that they would have said, oh, that one in the middle is a sacrifice. For one, he's human, and human sacrifice is forbidden in Jewish law, and two, he's killed outside the city and not in the temple. Okay, so yes, good question. And we're going to use this really as, I think, an opportunity to, I guess, address some of the complexity with which the New Testament addresses Jesus' death and resurrection.
Especially the sacrifice part.
Yeah, I think
sometimes it's Passover sacrifice. Sometimes it's an atoning sacrifice.
Right.
These are different sacrifices.
Right, and then sometimes questions like this make me think that we've done a poor job in churches distinguishing, or at least understanding the Old Testament world well enough to be able to distinguish the rich world of Old Testament sacrifices and festivals and stories that the New Testament is going to tap into. So in this podcast, we're going to, when we say atonement, we're thinking specifically Leviticus 16 stuff, the washing and cleansing of the temple for the presence of God, which we've done podcasts about, I think. If we say Passover, we're thinking specifically of the Exodus story, right? The night before he's leading them out and taking them to Mount Sinai, which is just totally different. Then there's issues of Christ being victorious, there's substitution stuff. All this stuff is going to be related. But when I sent this email to you and said, how should we address this? You said, hey, this totally fits because New Testament authors, it fits a good podcast because New Testament authors are kind of it takes them a while to kind of process everything that happened. And he's correct that no one sitting there would have thought, look at that.
Yeah.
It's the atonement happening. And it's the Passover happening. And, right?
Yeah, this is decades-long process to sift through and come to terms with. And the way that the New Testament world comes to terms with what happened at the cross and death, burial, resurrection, ascension, is to draw from the well of Old Testament stories. And so this is where we get Exodus, we get Leviticus, all kinds of
New
stuff.
covenant stuff.
Yep.
Potentially
prophets.
Numbers. I'm thinking of the outside the camp.
Right.
So these are the images that they employ to make sense of what God accomplished through Jesus.
Right. So we can, I think, talk about some of those today. Obviously, like, this is such a huge topic, and I mean, just the issue of atonement. That one issue of atonement itself.
This brings up, it's probably worth saying we have a tendency to either flatten all of these complex images.
Like we in the church, you mean?
In the church. Or just latch onto one in exclusion to all kinds of others. And I think atonement is a good example of that.
Where people use this word atonement, where if you talk to atonement, if you say atonement to an Old Testament professor, they just go straight to Leviticus 16, presence of God in the temple, cleansing of the temple, and those sacrifices associated with it. But in some churches that I've been to, they say atonement, and they really mean all these things.
Well, and so yes, there's that side of this, and also if you don't make this the most important, then you don't get salvation.
Oh, right,
You don't understand the salvation as the Bible talks about it.
Right.
And that's wrong to focus on one or to flatten it out. This is how did you describe it? In the last time we talked about this.
What I refuse to.
What is
It's like
Dr.
this
Moore
orchestra.
refers to the globe, right? And
Yeah, that's right.
the salvation is this beautiful gem, and when you turn it, you look at one side and you see atonement, and then the other you see new Exodus, and on this side you see victory and warfare imagery. And
Yeah, Dr. Moore's talked about
right?
it. Yeah, he's talked about it where he said his Old Testament professor held up a globe and he said, asked his students, he's standing in front of the class, he says, what do you see? And they said, we see the United States. And he says, well, I see China. And it's like, well, because it's a globe, and there's a bunch of there's a bunch of ways to look at this thing, and depending upon how you hold it, you're going to see the same thing differently.
Apparently, Dan's globe has facets like a jewel.
Yeah,
the way he
Listen, guys, I changed the image real fast without telling you. Which is what happens in the New Testament. There are lots of images, just kind of one on top of the other. So the place we should start is probably with Jesus. When he is about to die, he uses some of these images to characterize what's about to happen.
Yeah, some but not all. So let's hear what he has to say.
Do you want to read it? Can we just summarize?
Let me read. I have nothing else to do in this podcast. Right. I'll read.
He focuses, before we read it, this is one where he focuses heavily on Passover, because Passover is the beginning of the Old Covenant, like it leads up to this Old Covenant that they have at Sinai. He's doing this Passover meal, Passover lamb stuff as this intro to New Covenant. Is that how you were talking about it earlier? And there's some ransomy stuff going on in there as well, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What God's accomplishing through Jesus is bringing about this new covenant that the prophets talked about.
Right. We're not going to hear in this quote, so we're not going to hear Jesus saying, "And I'm cleansing the temple."
Right.
Right. And so anyway, just to let you know that they do talk about one and sometimes not others.
All right, here we go. So this is the Passover meal. When the time came, Jesus and the apostles sat down together at the table. I'm reading from Luke 22, verse 14 and following. Jesus said, "I've been very eager to eat this Passover meal with you before my suffering begins. For I tell you now that I won't eat this meal again until its meaning is fulfilled in the kingdom of God." And then he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. Then he said, "Take this and share it among yourselves, for I will not drink wine again until the kingdom of God has come."
Hey, can we interrupt here? As far as attaching significance to what God is doing, the primary lens through which Jesus views what God is doing through him is kingdom language.
Bringing the kingdom,
is
ushering
kingdom.
It in.
You're in, you're out, how to get in, how to stay in. That's the salvation image that Jesus uses most. And so he's using this meal this is a climactic conclusion to that story.
Okay.
Nice. So carrying on at verse 19, he took some bread and gave thanks to God for it. And then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this to remember me." And after supper, he took another cup of wine. I like that. And said, "This cup is..."
I feel like you're focusing on the wrong things here, Eric.
My bad. "This cup is the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you."
That's right. Okay, so we have something that's initiating a new covenant, and he's saying it's my death.
Right.
And so, like the old covenant was kicked off with the Passover lamb, and then the sacrifice at Sinai. Right?
Yes.
There's kind of a conflation of things here in the New Testament, and that's okay because that's what happens in the New Testament.
Nice. So Passover stuff is definitely happening there, linked to new covenant, which is expected in the prophets all over the place. This new covenant that's going to come. All right. So take us to the next thing. What happens next? Or another thing. You had talked earlier.
So that's the first place we probably need to start is New Exodus, New Covenant, Kingdom of God, if we're talking about salvation as the New Testament reflects on it. A lot of what Jesus has been doing in the Gospels and then that the church realizes after Pentecost is, we are a new temple. We are now the presence of God. And so the significance of atonement stuff becomes a little bit clearer in light of this new reality. We're the temple. And so it makes sense that another thing Jesus accomplished was making this space habitable.
Right, because for them, they're going to think, if we are the temple, then how are we made clean so that the presence of God can dwell in us, right? And they're like, Old Testament, we have already a work for that, right, which is the Day of Atonement when the blood is used to cleanse, right? And then the author of Hebrews riffs on this. And it's like, they had to do it every year, but now it's done once and for all, right?
Do we dare wade into, I guess we just did since we're recording this, atonement, right? Some of the argument about atonement is limited versus, are your eyes stinging, Eric? Is that?
No, I'm wide awake.
Oh, man, you just
I'm wide awake.
And atonement isn't for people, it's for the space.
Right.
And so the argument kind of dissolves in light of understanding.
Yeah.
So atonement is for the space.
Yeah.
So there's arguments about for whom is this atonement.
Right. It's for the space. It's for the place. Right. Anyway, so now that we have poked that bear with very, very big bear with a very sharp stick.
Whoa.
Contact Dan Lowry at D. Lowry at
Lowry at pillarseminary.org.
But so we're building the imagery in the history of salvation as the Gospels and the rest of the New Testament bears this out. I think another important one, and the occasion for understanding this, another important image of salvation is adoption, which comes to be factored in when Gentiles are introduced to this kingdom, right? And adoption becomes another vehicle to be able to, Scott.
I hate
a vehicle.
Stop that. That's not how that word is said.
How do you say it?
So
I still don't know how you said it.
Vehicle.
No, guys. No one says the H.
Yes,
no one says that.
Yes, they do. Am I not a person?
Well.
All right. Anyway.
All right. So back to adoption. This is another one of these images that may also be connected in the Old Testament world to kinsman redeemer. Sorts of imagery and symbolism, and that's another facet of this globe.
Right. Okay, sure. So you're trying to move us out of thinking of...
You laughed. He didn't. It didn't even faze him. I got no reaction from you.
Sorry. Okay, so you're trying to move us out of thinking about all the technical issues here to kind of zooming out a bit and saying that they're having a discussion about a larger thing in a bunch of different ways. So Brandon, in his email, mentioned that. He said, what did he say at the very end?
Well,
maybe I need to be able to step back from the weeds and see something bigger here.
So, yes, I guess back to his email, which is why we started. Jesus was, in fact, executed as a criminal.
Yes.
Very clearly, the Romans only executed criminals.
Right.
Mostly by the cross, treasonous criminals. So he was a criminal. That's how we get this image. And we come to see, looking back on it, through the grid of Jesus' words and his life, the more robust picture of its significance. But the event we're trying to make sense of is salvation of God as described in the story of God. In the
Okay.
scriptures,
And then the
right?
pivotal event of Christ's death on the cross and the resurrection and what role that plays in the kind of inauguration of the kingdom.
That's
I
right.
suppose.
Yeah, we can't just talk death. Death did accomplish something, but burial, resurrection validated a lot of what Jesus
Right.
was saying.
This
And
is
then the
victory
ascension.
stuff, right?
Right.
Okay, so
Right.
wait, can we read like a victory verse or two just so we can hear them talk
Sure.
about
So, Ephesians, when Paul's talking about gifts, he refers to No, let's not do that one because that gets us in real trouble.
Okay, let's go to a different one then.
What would be another?
Now that we've said that on tape.
Now everybody's going to wonder what it is. We might as well read it.
All right. Oh, so it's when he descends and then he ascends and he gives gifts, right? And he kind of misuses some of the Old Testament
What?
to talk about this victorious Christ.
Go on. I want to
So
hear
the
this.
victory. Let's step back.
This is all going on the YouTube.
The-
I'm really excited.
The victory component is when Christ ascends to the right hand of the Father and sits down on his throne.
Okay.
The significance becomes clear. With this ascension piece of it is he has conquered. He is done. It's the same thing as when God rests on the seventh day, right? He's
Yeah,
sitting
sure.
down at the control room
Yeah.
to take up his rule, and that's what Jesus is doing as the New Testament reflects back on it.
All right, I want to hear this Ephesians
Yeah,
passage.
where is this passage?
This is in
you're
4,
referring to? Okay.
where he
For
gives
what?
gifts.
What's
It's the distribution, 10 or something. I mean, look,
What do you have on your notes? You have
I don't have it
Okay.
on my notes. I'm
No, no.
using my brain
This
notes.
is page 897. Now, these Ephesians 4:11. Now, these are the gifts Christ gave to the church: the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, and the pastors and teachers. That one? Their responsibility is to equip God's
Wait,
people
no, it's
to
before that. Did you read? Do you
No,
see
you
the
didn't.
offset?
He
passage?
wasn't even reading. You weren't listening. He was saying that that's where it ends.
He said the gifts.
Yeah,
It's
but-
the gifts thing.
There it is.
And there it
It's
is.
7.
I saw
Okay, go
he
ahead.
gave these gifts.
It's what introduces the gifts. Where did Jesus get these gifts?
Okay,
It's
go ahead.
because he
So it's
conquered.
page 896.
It's page 897.
Oh,
It's just
897.
verse 7. He's given to each one of us a special gift through the generosity of Christ. That is why the scriptures say, when he ascended to the heights, he led a crowd of captives and gave gifts to his people. So there's this victorious, I guess the idea is a Roman triumph, right? When the general
Sure.
would come, he would lead this parade and processional.
Oh, it's like the Colossians
So
stuff.
Colossians,
talking
he's
about
led
Jesus.
his
Okay.
triumph and he nailed those things to the cross.
Weird.
The
So-
Colossians one would have been more clear.
Okay, so let's do this again. Say the Victor stuff. Now just like launch into a couple clear verses without the ones that don't work. How about that?
Okay.
So give me the Christus Victor stuff.
Okay, so another facet of this is looking at what was accomplished with, and I guess we'd been talking about the death, burial, resurrection, ascension.
Yep.
And so what is strongly implied by this is victory. And Jesus begins by telling us that the strong man's been bound and he's plundering his house.
Right.
The powers of darkness are being pushed back against. And so another thing that Jesus' death accomplishes, what are you reading?
I'm laughing because anytime Scott tries to goad you to say something,
You won't say it
Say it. Why don't you say it?
because I don't have the list. I just want to
Here.
know what it is.
Look,
Okay.
read the list.
so basically he wants you to say, yeah, he's also described as a victor. But like
You won't
give
say
a
it.
whole paragraph before you finally get to
Okay.
Say it. Oh, I knocked me over.
Okay. Listen.
You say it. Take it. You
Because
can talk in this too.
I don't know the verses. I don't know this
They're
stuff.
right there, big guy.
Okay. I want you to go through it. I like the way you were doing it just then, contrary to what orangutan over there in the corner is saying.
You pronounced it correctly. Way to go.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was a nice vehicle of pronunciation.
All right, go ahead.
I don't know if I'm saying it the way you think it should be said or not.
I know you don't, because it doesn't matter. It's like giving you like a fine tool to work with. You just start whacking stuff with it. You wouldn't even know what to do. You'd be like, what do I hit?
Hey,
Okay, anyway. All right. Okay, so launch with Christus Victor stuff and just say, okay, here's another thing. And so all I want to do is have some verses read where we hear them talked about victory without talking about Passover lamb, so that we can just see that they've spun the
Okay.
globe around.
so flip to Revelation 1. Okay, so another
That's
angle
not
here.
even on your list.
Oh my goodness.
What?
I'm actually just recalling
Oh, really?
data. Is that okay? Do I have to just read a list
No, I thought you. Okay,
of
okay.
shorthand notes of...
No, I'm good. I'm
I
happy.
almost said something you had to bleep out.
All right, wait. Okay, so talk to me about Christ as
So
victor.
another angle to this salvation imagery is that Jesus conquered. And we know this clearly from his ascension.
Okay.
But we see this from the rest of the New Testament. He is victorious over what? Over death, over the prime agent of death, Satan, over his minions. These powers have been conquered and nailed to the cross, as Paul says in Colossians. Hey, Eric, do you want to read Colossians?
You just told me to flip to Revelation.
Oh my God, we're gonna have to record this again. Just frickin' shoot me.
Oh, first try. I went right to Colossians.
All right, go.
What do you want me to read in Colossians?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You can read the Christ hymn in chapter 1. You can read the end of chapter 2.
How about you read Colossians 2:14?
Okay. He canceled the record.
Stop!
This is page 903 in our Bibles.
Stop! Look, how am I going to release any of
He
it?
canceled the
No,
record.
you can't talk while I'm
Oh
talking.
my gosh. What's the problem with this? Who's the problem here?
All right, go
He
on.
canceled the record of charges against us and took it away by nailing it to the cross. In this way, he disarmed the spiritual rulers and authorities. He shamed them publicly by his victory over them on the cross.
Right, and in that case, we're not talking Passover. We're not talking a presence of God in the temple. We're talking of defeat of this enemy, right?
Right. And it's probably also fair to mention when Paul says cross in context like this, he's not just talking about the death.
He's talking the whole
kinda
package.
combining. This is the story of Jesus
Right.
that he's referring to.
Good. So the idea here is that, when Brandon asks, hey, are they looking up at this cross thinking, hey, this is the sacrifice, blah, blah, blah. And are they processing this later? Yes, they're definitely processing this later. And as they do, they start to see, oh, there are all these things that are defeated or addressed on the cross to inaugurate this kingdom of God that has now come under Jesus.
Yeah.
Right? Is that fair?
Yes.
Is there any more we need to do, or are we good there?
Should I read the list? It might be good to read the list at this point.
Yeah,
Should
yeah.
I read the list, Scott? So let's make sure we've read the list and my notes. And so let me just, for the sake of wholeness and completion.
For the sake of...
Stop.
Okay.
I like all
Let
the
me
data.
read my notes. Can I finish? Images of Jesus and his atonement at a glance.
I
There
like
are
death of the
5
cross.
categories.
Okay.
Temple sacrifice, imagery,
Yep.
and some verses, which if you want, we can point to.
You can just say
Court of law, marketplace, battlefield warrior, and new Exodus, new covenant. And there are these categories where we get the temple sacrifice, we get sacrificial sacrifice imagery. Court of law, we get penile execution, and justification is part of the court of law. And then with the marketplace or the kinsman redeemer, we get ransom. Why are you laughing? Did I just...
no.
So battlefield warrior, we get victory conversation. And then new Exodus, we have Passover stuff.
Awesome.
And it's the big the big picture.
It's going to be the worst podcast to edit in the history.
Hey, maybe you should have just done the one we already did.
That's a good point right there.
No, the sound was terrible. Stop.
All right. And I think that's about it, Brandon. Email Scott with your follow-up questions because he will answer all of them. I'll pass along my notes and that list.
Wow, I was okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Well, thanks for listening and subscribing. And you can reach out to us.
Stop for a second. This is literally the worst. I have no idea where we went. You are the most squirrel ADD person that's ever lived.
He said that same thing to me.
Yes. So what we've just done is...
No, that actually worked. It
is
was fine.
take a piece that has been misunderstood because it's been applied out of context. And we've provided the context. Somewhat... Oh my gosh, are you on the phone right now? Oh, how I've missed you guys.
I can hear your phone.
Yes,
You
yes,
have
we
your-
can all hear.
You
We
have
can
your
hear.
ear next to it. How can you not hear it? How are you not deaf?
Hey,
Listen.
you need to not cut any of this and send it out into the ether. Because this is an accurate depiction of what we do and what Pillar feels like.
Yeah, it kind of is.
It is.
That look right there. That's
Yep,
Pillar.
It is. It is. I'm going to have more water.
Why can't you guys talk in a straight line?
We just painted a more accurate picture.
I mean execution. That's all I could think when you said that.
Finish your... Why don't you outro now?
All right, I got to make a call. Are we good?
Yes.
Outro.
I just did.
No, you didn't. You did a terrible
you
job.
Did not. You did
Awesome.
not. Go.
Thanks for listening.
No, you can't do it while he's talking. Neither of you understand.
Will you
this.
stop talking so I can do this?
It's so fun. It's so fun.
I hate you guys so hard right now. I hope you choke on that phone conversation.
All right.
Sorry.
Why don't you do the outro this time?
I'll do it.
All right, do it. Oh!
Hey, thanks for coming.
No, stop! Oh my gosh, just do it. Just
All
finish.
right. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening and subscribing. And you can reach out to us with other podcast topics or whatever at info@Pillar Seminary. Wait, podcast, which is
Yes, that's what it is. But we should note that we've got more events on the website. Like we're doing the watermark thing on March 30th. You can register for it there. We're doing in Chicago, I think the second weekend in April. So we'll be around there. I think we've got actually some time open. So if you're in Chicago and want to do a workshop or something, let us know. Yeah. So that's events thingies, but whatever.
Awesome.
And then podcast at pillarseminary.org.
Podcast
Every
at pillarseminary.org.
single time.
Yeah. And Donnell will hopefully be with us next time, right?
Yeah.
To wrap up
To
some of
do the second part of the Golden
worship
Calf
stuff that
thing.
we were talking about. With the
Yeah, a
Golden
lot
Calf,
of people have talked about that, wanting to get follow-ups on that. So
I think my wife called that the single most dissatisfying podcast she's ever listened to.
Well, because of the way it ended.
Because it left her hanging.
Okay, right.
Okay,
That's
well-
it.
Yeah.
way to sell it, guys.
See you later.
All right, I'm out.
Later.